It all begins with a once peaceful sky, but suddenly a rift opens up and tears through the heavens. From this mysterious hole, all sorts of different things began to fall endlessly to Earth. It was junk from other civilizations, carrying toxic materials and the strange monsters that emerged from it. Faced with this threat, humanity was defenseless and soon fell into total despair. But along with the ruins came a new hope, for within them were the relics. Inside these ruins were weapons capable of fighting on equal terms with the monsters. There was also a flying cape that floated in the air through some mysterious power. There were even alchemy potions that could turn common stones into pure gold. And also, delicious foods with flavors that seemed to be from another world. So, these precious items became known to everyone as the famous relics. They created a new economy and attracted people who would risk everything to obtain them. Just then, we see the young Kurogane Toma, an E-rank hunter who seems to have found something. After clearing the dungeon, the leader announces that the relics will be divided based on each person's contribution. One of the bigger guys calls out to the protagonist, who answers with a bit of fear. We soon see that the other members are already taking the best items for themselves without a second thought. Another one says he'll dock a teammate's points just because he ate during the mission. The boy picks up a small item, thinking it might serve as medicine for Suzu's illness. But a guy in a blue tracksuit shows up and simply snatches the item from young Tuma's hand. Without a second thought, the man kicks our protagonist in the face, sending him to the ground. He then lifts him up and says that a mere porter who can't activate relics deserves nothing. The men mock him, saying that relics choose their owners, and that's why he's useless. With contempt, the man in the tracksuit carelessly tosses the item away. He then yells for the young man to go fetch the object like a beggar if he really wants it. The protagonist thinks the guy is right but believes he will soon find what he's looking for. That's because his eyes have a special ability that allows him to see the relics. And amidst the rubble, he finds the item and tells Suzu to just wait for him. The scene shifts to a hospital, and the young man confirms there's no doubt about what he found. A man holds the item and identifies it as an eye drop called Clear Vision Liquid. Kurogane is quite disappointed by this, but the doctor tells him not to worry so much. The doctor explains that the medicine is incredible and its value will be used for Suzu's bills. Even so, Gaia praises Tuma's ability to sense relics, saying his talent is amazing. The young man retorts that this power is useless if he can't find a cure for his sister. He then thinks about a legendary item that could solve everything, the famous elixir. The doctor says the elixir is a panacea, capable of curing any disease and reviving the fallen. He continues, saying it was found in the White Dragon's dungeon, but its location is a mystery. Gaia confesses he became a hunter to find the elixir because, as a doctor, he feels powerless. Then, the petrification disease is explained, a rare condition with no known cure. Those who suffer from this disease watch their bodies slowly turn to stone. And in the end, the person's body simply crumbles away, leading to a tragic end. We then see a petrified hand breaking into several pieces on the floor. We then see Tuma's younger sister, 14-year-old Suzu, who suffers from the petrification disease. They enter the room and see the girl with her hand already crumbling into pieces of stone. In a comical scene, the girl's stone hand grabs her brother's hair, causing him to panic. He yells in desperation, asking what she's doing with her hand like that. The girl says it's fine and that having a stone arm is actually convenient, but her brother disagrees. Returning to normal, the protagonist asks how she's feeling today, and she replies that she's great. At that moment, the girl points to a cross necklace the young man is wearing. She then asks if he still keeps that old thing and tells him to throw it away, but he refuses. The girl gets a little embarrassed and says that was 10 years ago, calling him an idiot. But suddenly, everything starts to shake violently, and the young man loses his balance, falling to the floor. Chaos erupts in the hospital with all the patients running and screaming, frightened by the tremor. The young man quickly shields his sister with his body, and soon after the earthquake finally stops. Suzu calls out her brother's name while the doctor and another person look outside, shocked. Through the window, they see a massive dungeon ruin that appeared right next to the building. In the sky, a creature resembling a white dragon flies around the mysterious structure. Gaia then remembers an old legend about the appearance of the White Dragon's dungeon. The protagonist is in shock as he realizes that the elixir, the cure for his sister, is right there. His eyes widen as his sister watches him, not quite understanding the situation. But in an instant, Suzu has a crisis and collapses onto the bed, her health much worse. The young man panics because she's never had such a severe crisis and calls for Dr. Gaia. The doctor reveals that Suzu is already in the final stage of the disease and calls out to her brother. He continues, saying she doesn't have much time left, leaving the young man in complete shock. Gaia then apologizes and explains that he kept it a secret at the girl's own request. The doctor comments that the girl only pretended to be well when the protagonist was around. He then concludes that the pain she must have been feeling was unimaginable. The young man feels guilty because he was by her side and still pretended everything was fine. With new determination, he looks at the dungeon and decides he needs to go there. His sister calls out to him, and he turns to leave the room, but she tries to stop him. The girl, with her last bit of strength, asks him not to put himself in danger for her. But Tuma says everything will be alright and that her big brother will be back soon. He then runs off, promising that he will find the elixir and cure her, no matter what. And outside, the ice dragon roars fiercely, flying over the enormous stone structure. The protagonist enters the dungeon alone, determined to find the item he needs. Inside the place, he finds it strange because there are no monsters, which makes him very suspicious, but he believes in himself as he has spent his entire life carrying heavy equipment. With that in mind, the young man presses forward, confident he can handle whatever comes his way. But just ahead, he finds an entire group of hunters who've been completely eliminated. With his heart pounding, he realizes that the enemy who did this is still nearby. A purple mist starts to appear and the boy feels lost, not knowing where to go. But he feels a pull stronger than ever and realizes he's being drawn somewhere. He senses this is different from a normal relic. It feels like something is specifically calling to him. Continuing on the path, the young man passes by a strange creature lying on the ground. But suddenly, a giant carnivorous plant appears out of nowhere and lunges at the young man. The protagonist is completely shocked and frozen by the monster's surprise attack. The creature then tries to devour him in one go, but he narrowly dodges it. Looking back, the boy sees that there's actually a whole horde of bizarre monsters there. He then thinks that he can't stop now, or it will be the end for him and his sister. Without fear, the young man runs with all his might through the horde of creatures without looking back. Dodging their attacks, he swiftly moves past all the monsters trying to catch him. The path is just ahead, and he keeps running, clearing a way through the creatures. With his eyes focused on his goal, he doesn't give up and continues to move forward. But to his dismay, the path he was following seems to have reached a dead end. He then becomes desperate, thinking it's impossible to continue and that all is lost. But he refuses to give up and tells himself he needs to believe in his path. And with a leap of faith, the young man passes through what appeared to be a solid wall. On the other side, he falls to the ground, completely exhausted but happy to have made it through. As he gets up, he finds himself in a room full of treasures and a small white dragon. The young man recognizes the creature and can't believe the white dragon is right in front of him. Then his eyes find what he had been searching for, the legendary elixir, resting on an altar. The item's aura is on another level, and he finally confirms that he has found the cure for Suzu. Holding the vial, he confirms there's no mistake, that is the legendary elixir, the sacred medicine. With tears in his eyes, the young man celebrates, for he has finally obtained the cure for Suzu's illness. But in an instant of happiness, a blade passes through his body, leaving him completely stunned. Then, right behind him, Dr. Gaia appears with a sinister smile and tells him to be careful. The doctor compliments the young man's eyes and says he's glad he followed him there, taking the item for himself. With a push, he throws the boy to the ground and thanks him for showing the way to the treasure. The man then admires the vial in his hands and reveals that this was what he had been looking for all along. Fallen and wounded, Kurogane doesn't understand anything and asks why the doctor is there doing this. The doctor is surprised he didn't notice and says that people become blind when it comes to illness. He then explains that if you lie about a cure, people will pay fortunes even for rainwater. And if you say the treatment is expensive, they'll work themselves to the bone just to bring him more relics. With a crazed look, the doctor screams and wonders why he would ever bother to cure them. The protagonist is completely shocked by the sick revelation from the man he trusted. Gaia continues, saying that as long as there are fools in the world, his pockets will be full, thinking of himself as a genius. But even wounded, the young man crawls and grabs the doctor's leg with his last bit of strength. He begs the doctor to use the elixir to save Suzu and promises he'll find more relics. The man looks at him with contempt and coldly says that he doesn't think that's going to happen. He dreams that with the elixir, countless patients will crawl to him and worship him as a savior. With a wicked smile, he clutches the vial tightly and says he will finally become a god. But he turns to Tuma and asks what's the point of saving them since his sister is trash. With eyes full of rage, the young man asks what the heck he just said about his sister. Gaia then reveals he has no more use for Suzu, and the same goes for Tuma, as there will always be more suckers. With a cruel smile, he says it's time to end the conversation while the young man begs him to stop. Then the man pulls out a small bell that emits a strange sound and a mysterious purple aura. This item is the slave's bell, and with it, the doctor summons a pack of fire wolves out of thin air. The fierce creatures soon surround the protagonist, who is down and has no strength to react. With a sadistic smile, Gaia orders the wolves to attack him, leaving not a single hair behind. The beast then charged with full force toward the boy, who is about to be completely eliminated. Meanwhile, at the hospital, young Suzu feels she doesn't have much time left. She begins to pray to God as she has a vision of her brother being attacked by the monsters. With her hands clasped, the girl prays with all her might for God to protect her big brother. At that exact moment, the cross necklace Kurogane Toma wears begins to glow brightly. With newfound strength, he gets up and shouts that he will get that elixir back, no matter how. Holding the necklace, he affirms that he won't give up and will save Suzu, whatever it takes. But one of the fire wolves wastes no time and lunges straight at the young man. Even surrounded by all the creatures, he prepares to fight with unshakable determination. Back in the room, the protagonist's sister continues to pray with all her faith for his safety. The young man looks to the side with a serious and focused gaze, ready for whatever comes in the battle. He then shouts that he will do anything for her because Suzu is the only family he has left in the world. Upon hearing the word love, a mysterious and ethereal figure seems to smile from somewhere far away. In that instant, a strange memory appears in the young man's mind, showing a figure falling from the sky. The young man is confused as a blue light completely envelops him, changing the situation. Suddenly, a bluish spirit appears, and the fire wolves seem to retreat in fear of its presence. The protagonist then wonders who that mysterious figure is that just appeared out of nowhere. He then sees a memory of when he was younger, and the same spirit found him sitting on the ground. The creature then touches the cross necklace he carries, and unknown power begins to flow. With that, a golden light explodes from his body, and his latent power is finally awakened. Dr. Gaia is completely shocked and speechless, not understanding what is happening. A huge wave of energy spreads through the area, pushing all the creatures away from the young man. The doctor can't believe what he's seeing as the young man stands up with a powerful aura and a new weapon. From the cross necklace he wore, a black blade is created, and he holds it firmly in his hand. Without hesitation, the boy leaps toward the doctor, who is paralyzed by the speed of the attack. Gaia then yells furiously at the wolves and orders them attack and finish the protagonist. But the young man in the air prepares a powerful attack with his new blade, which emanates a blue light. With a single strike, he unleashes a storm of blades that destroys all the wolves at once. The doctor panics because the young man defeated the monsters and shouldn't even be able to use relics. Now with new power, Kurogane Toma faces the villain with a completely different posture. With a cold and determined look, he orders the doctor to return the elixir immediately. He then shouts in anger, saying that item belongs to Suzu and no one else. The ground cracks under the pressure of the young man's aura, while Gaia just scoffs at the situation. The doctor mocks the young man, telling him not to get cocky just because he found a usable item. With an air of superiority, he boasts about being an A-rank hunter on a completely different level. But the protagonist stares down the villain seriously and says he'll show him the real difference. Then Gaia shouts that he will show off his supreme equipment, assembled with power stolen from suckers. But before he could do anything, all of his equipment suddenly shatters into 1,000 pieces. He falls into complete despair and screams, not understanding what the young man just did to him. With a frightened calm, the young man says he has no time for this silly, unfunny game. He then looks at the doctor and tells him to hand over the elixir quietly and without resistance. Suddenly, the protagonist feels his senses sharpening as new information flows into his mind. He now perfectly understands how to use this mysterious thing in his hands. The doctor is terrified and wonders what the heck that artifact the boy is holding is. But fear turns to greed, and he shouts that he will take that item for himself by force. He then pulls out a golden dagger, saying it's a waste to use it, but that he'll show its power. The doctor reveals that this is a gold rank relic called Gluttony, an extremely rare item. But the bluish spirit appears next to Tuma and advises him to change the sword's blade. The figure explains that the current blade is made of life energy, and it's a waste to keep using it. The young man gets the message and picks up a piece of rock to try a new approach with the weapon. It is revealed that the sword is named Aeon, and its ability is the reconstruction of all matter. Using blade creation, the young man transforms the rock into a new obsidian sword. With the transformation complete, the new and powerful blade Kokyujin is finally ready for battle. The spirit says the new sword is sufficient and tells the young man to attack with everything he has, without hesitation. The doctor is surprised and wonders if the young man hasn't already run out of energy to keep fighting. He then yells and launches a massive fire attack called Smiling Bomber at the protagonist. The blast of fire rushes forward, destroying the ground and carving a huge crater in its path. With a gigantic explosion, Gaia's attack completely devastates the entire area around them. But the young man concentrates with his sword as the spirit's eyes watch him from behind. He then swings his weapon and releases a wave of blue energy that cuts the fire attack in half. The strike is so powerful that it continues forward, tearing the ground into two parts with great ease. The attack grazes past the doctor and shoots up to the heavens, destroying the entire dungeon wall. The villain is completely paralyzed with fear upon seeing the absurd power of the boy's strike. His golden dagger falls to the ground and shatters beside him, and he doesn't even notice what happened. Completely in shock and breaking out in a cold sweat, the doctor can't even move from the sheer fear he feels. Seeing the young man approach, the man offers the elixir in exchange for his life without a second thought. He then bows and begs the protagonist to spare his life, handing over the precious item. But as the young man goes to take the vial, Gaia glares at him with a wicked and treacherous smile. With a swift movement, he grabs Tuma's arm tightly and yells for him to hand it over. But to his surprise, the doctor can't move and is stuck in place, not understanding why. The protagonist then says he can forgive what the man did to him, but there's a catch. With his eyes glowing with rage, he states that he will never forgive what he did to Suzu. And without mercy, the young man attacks the villain with all his fury to finally put an end to it. With a direct hit, the young man strikes the doctor right in the face with the hilt of his sword. The impact is so strong that the villain is sent flying and crashes hard onto the ground. Gaia is left lying unconscious as a small light leaves his body and vanishes into the air. But the noise of the fight has attracted the attention of all the bizarre monsters in the dungeon. With that, an entire horde of creatures runs toward the protagonist without stopping for a second. The young man then feels his body is much lighter than before and prepares for what's to come. Floating, he asks the spirit who he is and if all this power is somehow his as well. With the sword in hand, he questions the mysterious figure about why it decided to help him now. The being of light then replies that it had been starving for a terribly long time and needed to feed. In a flashback, we see the moment Suzu gave the origami to her brother, who was quite startled. The creature explains that with this, it was given permission to feed on the affection it felt there, and that this strong feeling came from the unbreakable bond between the protagonist and his younger sister. With an air of satisfaction, the being says the taste was exquisite and that it now feels magnificent. In a comical scene, the young man thinks it ate the origami, but the spirit denies it, saying that's not what happened. It then introduces itself as a lavigan, a connoisseur of love which it lives on to exist. Kurogane Tuma is completely confused by this bizarre and utterly nonsensical explanation. The being explains that to consume this love, it chose the origami as its new vessel. And with that, it decided to transform itself into an artifact, which is the cross-shaped sword. The young man then understands that it lives inside the sword, and the creature confirms it's exactly right. The spirit finally reveals its name as Aeon, an exiled existence from a distant other world. The spirit says that for the sake of love, it will lend its strength to the young man, who runs with all his might. The scene then shifts and shows the facade of the hospital where the girl is admitted. With a leap, the protagonist jumps through the window, startling everyone and praying she's still okay. Running desperately through the corridors, he prays that he can make it in time to save her. He then breaks down his sister's room door with all his strength and determination. With his eyes wide with worry, the young man shouts the girl's name, hoping for a response. But to his despair, he finds Suzu completely petrified on the bed. Heartbroken, a tear runs down his face as he realizes her body is cold. Without wasting time, he tries to give the elixir to his sister's statue while begging for it to work. The young man pours the entire liquid over her head and pleads with all his might for it to cure her. With his face full of tears, he continues to beg nonstop because he can't lose her. Kurogane then hugs her and asks her to call him Big Brother just one more time. At that moment, the girl's stone body begins to glow and dissolve into particles of light. The young man is stunned and just watches the mysterious scene unfold right before his eyes. And suddenly, his sister appears completely cured in front of him, as if nothing had happened. She then calls him Big Brother, and the boy is in shock, unable to believe what he's seeing. Overcome with emotion, he shouts Suzu's name and hugs her tightly to make sure she's real. The girl hugs him back, and they both thank God that everything worked out in the end. Meanwhile, the spirit Aeon seems to celebrate the outcome with a cry of satisfaction. With a smile on its face, it claps, appearing very happy with the power of the love it felt. Aeon says the love it felt is something precious and sweet, like a dream that transcends time. In a memory, the young man and his sister cry with happiness, and Aeon concludes that love is beautiful. The girl then looks confused at the spirit, who is silently eating the paper origami. Aeon turns to Tuma and says it hopes the girl recovers completely as soon as possible. The being of light asks if the young man hasn't noticed and tells him to look at Suzu's chest. Extremely embarrassed, the girl yells and calls the spirit an idiot for its clueless behavior. But upon looking at the girl's chest, the young man sees that the mark of the disease is still there. Without a second thought, the spirit slaps the protagonist hard on the head, leaving him confused. In a comical scene, Tuma asks why only he can see the being, and Aeon confirms that only he can. The protagonist doesn't understand because he used the elixir, and the disease should have vanished for good. Aeon then explains that what humans call the elixir is actually the tears of the white dragon. The being of light continues, saying that the tears heal wounds but do not remove curses from artifacts. The young man is completely shocked to hear that the disease is caused by a mysterious artifact. It is revealed that the item's name is Basilisk, and to cure her, the protagonist must obtain it. Without wasting time, the young man asks where he can find this artifact called Basilisk. But Aeon says there's no hurry, as the elixir will suppress the disease for a few more years. The protagonist is relieved, and Suzu asks who he's talking to so much, making the young man nervous. But suddenly outside, the white dragon appears, roaring with intense blue flames. The hospital starts to shake, and the young man grabs his sister to protect her from the ensuing chaos. Kurogane Tuma then looks out the window and sees the dragon causing major destruction in the city. The protagonist is startled to see the white dragon roaring and destroying everything outside. Aeon then confirms that this is the master creature of the ruins he invaded earlier. With a powerful roar, the beast shows all its strength and power to everyone there. Without a second thought, the young man grabs his sister and starts running to escape the disaster. The dragon seems to be looking for someone and shouts the name of Aeon, the creator of the lost artifact. With a serious look, the spirit says it will not let the creature escape under any circumstances. Kurogane Tuma shouts furiously and says he won't let the monster destroy his city. He then runs with determination because that is the place where he lives with his beloved sister, Suzu. Wielding his sword, the young man calls for Aeon and prepares for the battle that is about to begin. The being of light agrees and says it will help the young man as long as love exists in that place. Outside, a group of hunters faces the white dragon, unable to believe what they're seeing. They are very confused because the creature is supposed to be harmless and not attack anyone. One of the men panics and calls for help from the agency and the S-rank hunter named Ko. Even without a response from the agency, the warriors advance and attack the beast with everything they have. The blow hits the monster squarely but seems to have caused no significant damage. The dragon's eye remains calm, and it doesn't seem to care about the hunter's attack. The creature then attacks with its tail, and the leader orders all units to advance. But the attack is too powerful, and one of the men shouts that they won't be able to survive. They then fall to the ground, defeated but strangely still alive and unharmed. One of the hunters then looks ahead and sees a mysterious figure standing before them. Kurogane faces the white dragon alone while the other hunters lie on the ground. With a serious look and his weapon in hand, he prepares for the battle that is about to start. One of the hunters recognizes him and asks if he's the E-rank porter, thanking him for the help. The young man confirms with a smile and asks the other men to leave the rest to him. But without wasting time, the enormous creature prepares a massive energy attack in its mouth. The hunter panics and yells for the young man to run, as it's impossible to defeat the monster. But Tuma calmly says it's okay because he has finally found what he was looking for. Ayan then says this is an artifact weapon that even the young man can use without any trouble. With that, he prepares to use the bladeless creation ability in front of everyone. He then activates the power, but to everyone's surprise, absolutely nothing happens. The men shout for him to retreat, while the young man is left wondering what went wrong. The white dragon seems to laugh at the pathetic situation the spirit Ayan has gotten itself into. The creature then calls Ayan a pathetic and silent artifact, which makes the young man tense. With a roar, the monster orders the spirit to return to the ruins from which it should have never left. The beast then attacks with full force, sending the hunters flying with a blast of energy. With the impact, they all fall to the ground, completely defeated and with no strength to fight. The young man then shouts for Ayan and asks what the heck is happening with his powers. The spirit turns to the protagonist and simply tells them to go back to Suzu. Kurogane is completely stunned by the strange attitude of the being of light beside him. Ayan then explains that there is no love there, which is why it is completely drained and powerless. The young man says they need to defeat the monster or Suzu will still be in danger, but Ayan disagrees. The spirit complains that it only feels useless emotions like anger and fear, and that it's hungry again. Angrily, the protagonist asks if this is really the time for it to be worrying about hunger. The other hunters wonder who the young man is talking to so much and decide they need to protect him. But as they prepare, they realize their shields have already been completely destroyed in the fight. One of the men then decides to sacrifice himself to draw the dragon's attention and save the others. With a powerful weapon, he fires a massive energy projectile towards the creature. But the monster simply snaps up the attack as if it were nothing and lets out a grunt. The beast then calls the man an annoying insect and defeats him with a single, powerful blow. The protagonist then realizes he needs to convince Ayan to fight somehow in order to win. He then calls for the spirit, which seems completely exhausted and without any energy. The young man asks what the difference is between him saving Suzu and those people protecting themselves. But Ayan says that's just anger or survival instinct, and it's not real love. At that moment, one of the hunters seems to have a small epiphany about the situation. And with a cry of revelation, the young man says that what they feel is also love. Suddenly, the spirit starts to smell something different and becomes confused, not understanding what it is. The protagonist then takes out his phone and tells the being of light to look very carefully at the screen. The screen shows various types of love, and Ayan thinks it's just a bunch of random words. But the young man shouts that all of it together is a collection of love that forms the love of humanity. With this, the spirit is completely shocked and speechless by the young man's new revelation. The young man explains that humans can love not only their blood relatives but much more. He continues, saying that love extends to their romantic partners and significant others. And with another photo, he shows that the feeling also exists between true friends. The young man emphasizes that friendship is a very important form of love for people. He then says they love the people around them, and even those they've never met. With this, he concludes that humans are capable of loving even animals and nature itself. Finally, he shouts that people can love absolutely everything that exists in the universe. Ayan is in shock with so many types of love and says this is impossible for its race. The spirit finds this exotic and captivating, but at the same time very intense and even perverse. Seeing Ayan's reaction, the protagonist realizes this is his chance to turn the tables. He then shouts that the world is overflowing with love and prepares an attack called Echo Impact. With this, Ayan is hit by a wave of emotions and is left completely stunned in the air. Back in the fight, the dragon prepares a final attack while Hunter thinks it's the end. The man then apologizes to his fiancée as it seems their wedding has been cancelled. But suddenly, two comrades step in front of him to protect him with their shields. The hunter shouts at them, saying the shields are already at their limit and won't hold. One of the men then tells him to shut up and just leave, calling him fiancé. He even jokes that he'll owe them 2 presents but will let it slide this time. Seeing the scene, Ayan blushes and finally understands what humanity is really about. As a devourer of love, the spirit realizes it almost let that feast slip away. The dragon attacks with full force, but the protagonist throws himself in front to protect the other hunters. With his eyes glowing, he activates a new ability, the Twisted Dark Black Blade. And with this, he manages to pass through the dragon's fire blast without a single scratch. The other hunters are completely shocked as the flames were split in half. The young man then lands on the ground with a victorious smile and celebrates that the plan worked. Ayan now understands that there is romantic love and also the love of companionship. It then looks at its sword, which glows with a newly discovered power. And it understands that its blade can also protect them using the power of the love it felt. The white dragon then says it doesn't know what Ayan plans by becoming an artifact of that kind. But the creature says that its ideals, desires, and freedom are not permitted in any way. Angrily, the beast prepares another massive attack in its mouth and shouts the spirit's name. Ayan then asks the young man to create an even bigger, harder, and much sharper blade. The young man prepares and uses the bladeless creation ability to forge a new weapon. He then scrapes the sword on the ground to gather material and create a much stronger weapon. With this, he creates the steel slicing blade, a giant sword full of electric power. But upon attacking, the young man hits an invisible barrier and is thrown back by the impact. He is then shocked because the attack was useless and the barrier is too tough to break. The dragon looks down on him with an air of superiority and says the attack was completely useless. Seeing this, the other hunters shout to protect the porter and run to help. With that, the warriors unite and form a barrier to protect the protagonist from danger. One of the men shouts to the young man that they are fine and tells him to just run away alone. But the dragon calls them trash and launches a shower of fireballs toward everyone. The warriors panic as it's impossible to block so many attacks at once. Then Ayan tells Kurogane not to be confined only to the shape of a sword to fight. With this, the young man understands that creation is free, and the ability is the reconstruction of matter. The creature then shouts furiously and orders everyone there to turn to ash with its attack. Without wasting time, the protagonist throws an umbrella toward the fireballs. He then uses bladeless creation and combines the object with his sword in a unique way. With this, he creates an unlimited fabrication, transforming the item into a giant shield. The other hunters are confused and wonder what that thing that looks like an umbrella is. The rain of fire then hits the shield with full force, causing a gigantic explosion in the sky. The beast is completely shocked to see its attack was blocked by that object. Protected by the shield, the warriors wonder if they have finally been saved from danger. They then look at the young man and wonder who on earth that mysterious boy is. The dragon realizes that Ayan used its power to create an umbrella, but its master is a novice. The creature then scoffs and asks what he could do with a completely broken sword. The shield then dissipates, and the protagonist shouts for the pieces to return to his weapon. With the sword reforged, the young man leaps into the air with all his might and prepares for a new attack. He then descends with speed and strikes the monster's invisible barrier with all his strength. But the creature just stares at him and says with contempt that it already told him it was useless. But the protagonist shouts in anger and orders his sword to transform into something new. He then uses the weapon to rip a piece of the creature's barrier with a precise strike. The white dragon is surprised, as it didn't expect the young man to do something like that. The young man then grabs the piece of the barrier and shouts that this was exactly what he wanted. With that, a huge scale from the creature falls to the ground right in front of all the hunters. He then realizes that the scales are harder than steel and that he can use them to his advantage. With bladeless creation, the young man begins to forge a new weapon using the dragon's scale. And with that, he creates the Thunder Dragon's Blade, a sword made from the power of the beast itself. Ayan watches everything with a smile and thinks that with just a single piece of advice, the young man fights freely. The dragon is completely shocked by the scene and thinks that all of this is impossible. With a single strike, the creature is hit squarely and calls the young man a terrible child. The beast can't believe it was defeated by a mere brat and begins to fall apart. With that, the monster's body breaks into several pieces and the battle finally ends. The protagonist then falls to the ground completely exhausted, with his new sword by his side. Lying down, he wonders what this is and realizes he can no longer feel his strength in his body. With great effort, he tries to get up but realizes his power has simply vanished. At that moment, a strange pyramid-shaped object appears in the sky over the destroyed city. The mysterious object then begins to glow and release several beams of light all over the place. The dragon, lying on the ground, then turns to the young man and apologizes for what happened. The light heals everyone, and a man says his body has been healed and he can move perfectly. The young man on the ground sees the particles of light and understands they are the white dragon's tears. He then remembers the elixir and realizes the healing effect is exactly the same. With his body recovered, he calls for Ayan and says they need to get back to Suzu. But the spirit asks for a moment to consume all the love in that place and fill its belly. In the distance, the hunters look at the rainbow and can't believe the young man defeated the monster. They then approach and are surprised that a simple E-rank porter did all of that. The scene then shifts and shows the headquarters of Japan's Hunter Management Agency. In an office, a director shouts in shock, unable to believe that an E-rank defeated the white dragon. At that moment, a mysterious figure enters the room, saying that this is quite impressive. The men get nervous and ask who the person is who invaded the office without permission. Without a care, the figure sits in the director's chair with a very confident posture. The real director panics and stammers, saying that's his seat. The person then explains that they felt an extraordinary presence coming from the dragon's ruins. With their hands glowing, they conclude that the boy must be the owner of an incredible artifact. It is then revealed that she is the S-rank hunter Kyoki Hojo and that her destiny is calling. With a confident smile, she says her destiny commands her to go find the young Kurogane. A few days later, the young man starts a new life alongside Suzu but seems quite startled. He then looks at his bank statement and is shocked to see 50 million yen. This is the reward for defeating a disaster-class monster, and he is left speechless. Walking through the city with Ayan, he thinks that being a hunter is truly the dream job. With his eyes sparkling, the young man celebrates because now he can provide good food for his sister. But the spirit appears and asks if this happiness is also love, and the young man gets a bit flustered. It's revealed that conversations with Ayan now only happen inside the protagonist's mind. Arriving home, his sister greets him with a smile and says, "Welcome back, big brother." The boy smiles happily because he can finally live with his sister again like a normal family. They then have dinner together, and Ayan celebrates this normal life they haven't had for many years. The spirit goes crazy over the girl's homemade food and says it's full of love. Kurogane gives thanks for the meal and, with a smile on his face, says he is very happy. But suddenly, he notices a blonde woman having dinner with them and is shocked. The young man panics and wonders who the heck that woman is in his house. The woman then introduces herself as Hoja Kyoki from the Hunter Management Agency. Suzu and her brother are confused and wonder if she is a friend or co-worker of the other. With that, the young man tries to lead the woman outside while Suzu innocently asks for more food. Once outside in a park, the protagonist asks what she wants with him there. Kyoki then reveals that she knows he is looking for a specific relic. She explains that she saw his history on the agency's website, but he couldn't see anything. The boy then reveals he is looking for the relic called Basilisk and asks for help. Hojo says she doesn't know anything about it, but that he will get access if he becomes an A-rank hunter. Kurogane Telma feels awkward because he is still very far from reaching that level. But the woman points at him and says she will give him the chance to take the A-rank exam. The young man is shocked and says he's just an E-rank, but she explains it's a special exception. She then says that defeating the White Dragon is more than enough of an achievement. With this, he thinks he can find information about the Basilisk and cure Suzu's disease. But the woman interrupts him and says that for that to happen, there is only one condition. The young man then gets tense and wonders what the heck she could want in return. With a smile on her face, the woman simply asks him to lend her some money. The protagonist looks at his account and sees his balance is almost zero and gets depressed. She then thanks him and says he saved her from being sold to a South American circus. The woman says her debt and his savings are almost the same amount, calling it destiny. The young man asks if she will pay it back, and the woman shouts that they have finally arrived. They then arrive at a mountainous place and she reveals that this is the location of the A-rank exam. Looking around, he sees a group of people and wonders if they are also candidates. He feels a bit intimidated because all the candidates there seem very strong. The woman then says goodbye alongside a strange man and says she will stay there. But a woman with glasses grabs her and says angrily that the payment was 2 minutes late. He threatens her, saying that if she's late again, she will really go to the South American circus. The man then introduces himself to everyone as Hakagami Koya, the examiner for the A-rank test. He explains that the exam is to fill the vacancy left by the hunter Kuretani Gaia. The other candidates are confused because they don't understand why such a strong hunter disappeared. The protagonist then remembers the doctor and realizes he was indeed an A-rank hunter. The examiner then says that talented people don't need quotas to pass the test. He then declares that anyone he approves will be promoted directly to E-rank. The other candidates get excited about the news while Kyoki watches everything from a tree. With a confident smile, she seems sure that the young man will do well in this test. The man then explains to everyone that the exam method is very simple and easy to understand. With a snap of his fingers, he creates a huge circular area on the ground for the challenge to begin. He points to a timer and says they need to stay in the area for 5 minutes. Or the other option is to simply push him out of the area or defeat him at once. The other hunters think the test is basically a very relaxed sumo match. But the examiner reveals that his body is a clone and that they can attack with everything they've got. With that, all the candidates shout excitedly and get ready to start the great battle. The protagonist thinks that using the dragon scale blade might be quite risky right now. So he decides to use the steel slicing blade, which is a much safer weapon at the moment. Hakagami then announces with a serious look that the exam can finally begin for real. And in the blink of an eye, he defeats several candidates with completely absurd speed. Everyone is thrown out of the arena and lies on the ground, completely defeated. The remaining men are in shock because the attack was too fast to see. The examiner then turns to them and seems very disappointed with what he just saw. He says that hunters who rely only on relics are a huge disappointment to him. And he even compares Gaia, who thought he was strong but just bought relics with money. He continues, saying that replacing Gaia would be very easy for most of the people there. But he points out that A-rank hunters cannot fail because millions of lives are at stake. With a serious look, the man says he will not allow the weak to call themselves A-rank. With this declaration, the other candidates are completely terrified and speechless. At the agency headquarters, someone comments that it seems there will be no one approved again. In a meeting, it is said that all examinees must meet the agency's standards. A man explains that Hakagami is S-level but stays at A-rank just to filter the candidates. The problem is that his evaluation criteria are extremely strict and almost impossible, and because of that, to this day, no candidate has managed to pass his A-rank exam. With that, the remaining hunters scream and run desperately, trying to escape the arena. One of the men then praises the examiner, calling him the #1 A-rank, Hagami Koya. But a young redhead says that it's just a clone with 1/10 of the original strength. Without fear, the redhead boy summons a huge golden sword that shines with intense power. The other hunters are shocked to see the weapon and recognize it as a gold relic. Kurogane Tuma notices that the aura of that weapon is totally different from the one Gaia used. The young man then charges with all his might toward the examiner to test his great strength. With a shout, he unleashes a powerful attack called Epic Poem of Heroes with his sword. The golden energy blast advances and hits the examiner's clone with full force. But to everyone's surprise, Hakagami stops the giant blow with just a small dagger. The redhead boy is completely shocked and speechless at what just happened. The other candidates can't believe he stopped a gold relic with a silver weapon. But even with all his strength, the redhead boy can't move the blade even an inch. Angrily, he says that's enough playing around, and that now he will start fighting seriously. But in an instant, the young man seems to realize something terrible, and his eye shines with astonishment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he simply turns around and starts walking away. The other hunters shout and ask why he is giving up when there is still time. With his face sweating coldly, the boy reveals that the dagger is not a silver relic. He then concludes by saying that the examiner used just a common store-bought knife. With this revelation, all the other candidates are completely shocked and speechless. The redhead young man then withdraws furiously and shouts that things won't end like this. From a distance, he watches the arena and seems to be training alone to calm down a bit. Hakagami then puts away the knife and calmly says that retreating is also a great strategy. He then turns to the protagonist and asks why he isn't running away yet. But Tuma says he is looking for a relic, and for that, he needs to become an A-rank hunter. With the sword in hand, he prepares for combat because he has no other choice but to fight. Even if the path to the basilisk is brutal, the young man knows he cannot retreat now. The examiner smiles and says he feels a burning core coming from within the protagonist. The young man then attacks with all his might, but the man blocks the blow with his dagger effortlessly. With that, Hakagami starts to move at an incredible speed and dodges all the blows. He then fights against several hunters at the same time and defeats them with great ease. The protagonist is in trouble and says that fighting that man is like fighting a typhoon. The examiner then looks at the timer and realizes there are only 2 minutes left. With a serious look, he compliments the young man and says his attack speed is much higher. But he notices that the young man is reshaping the blade to keep up with his fast strikes. And yet, the young man didn't let his guard down against the relics just because of the knife. Kurigane Toma then thinks that the man can't use all his power with just that weapon. But to his surprise, Hakagami draws a new weapon, a golden spear full of power. The young man is completely shocked and speechless by the man's sudden change of weapon. With the new spear, the examiner attacks with a massive electric power toward the young man. The protagonist tries to block the blow with his sword, but the electricity hits him squarely. He is then thrown far away by the impact and rolls on the ground, unable to get up. With his hand numb, he realizes that his steel blade is at a disadvantage against lightning. But upon looking at the examiner, the young man seems to have an idea to turn the tables in his favor. Hakagami then realizes that even after all that, the young man is still not going to retreat. With that, he advances with his spear to finally end the fight once and for all. The protagonist thinks that the examiner is really strong and on a completely different level. Even down without strength, the young man refuses to give up and prepares to continue fighting. With a shout of determination, he gets up and says he won't back down no matter what. He then activates his special ability, Bladeless Creation, and the examiner notices something. With a bluish power, he forges his most powerful weapon, the Dragon Scale Blade. In the agency, the men are shocked because Hakagami used a gold relic in the test. But they wonder what black relic that is, as they only know of silver and gold ones. The director then says he has a hunch about what that mysterious weapon might be. With his eyes gleaming, he thinks the black relic might be a level above gold. Back in the arena, the protagonist and the examiner face each other, ready for the next move. The young man thinks he can no longer use the steel blade as it would be useless against the spear. That's because the iron of the sword easily attracts the examiner's lightning. He also dismisses the black obsidian blade because it wouldn't be reliable enough. And since the fight against Gaia, the young man hasn't been able to use his alchemy sword. But his dragon scale blade can only be used at full strength a single time. With that, he decides he has no choice and will bet everything on that one powerful blow. Without hesitation, the young man jumps and charges with all his might toward the examiner with his new weapon. The two then exchange blows at an incredible speed, and the battle becomes increasingly intense. The young man thinks that even while dodging the lightning, each of the man's blows is too heavy to withstand. But he realizes that the number of the examiner's attacks is not the same as before the exchange. He then understands that because the spear is very long, handling it is also much more difficult. Hakagami notices that the blade has changed but finds it strange that the young man is no longer attacking him. He notes that even with a small opening, the young man doesn't even look at his body. The examiner then realizes that the young man is trying to take him down with a single blow. With a focused eye, Kurigane Tuma waits for the perfect opening to attack with all his might. And finally finding the perfect opening, the young man charges with everything he has at the examiner. But as he gets closer, he is hit by an electric shock that leaves him completely paralyzed. The man then warns him not to jump headfirst into an opportunity that appears out of nowhere. With a powerful counterattack, he launches a blast of energy that hits the young man squarely. The explosion is so strong that it throws the other candidates far away, even though they were at a distance. Hakagami then praises his dodge but says that is only permissible for hunters up to B rank. With a serious look, he states that if there were something to protect behind him, he would already be done for. The young man stays on the ground, completely frightened by the scolding and the display of power. From a distance, the blonde woman observes and comments, "There are only 30 seconds left until the end of the test." Kurogane Tuma gets up, facing the examiner who seems very annoyed with his stubbornness. The young man thinks that the man's strength is simply overwhelming and too much for him to handle. Ayan then appears and says that Tuma's handling has worsened considerably, and the young man is confused. The spirit explains that relics use a special energy that it calls proloma. It continues, saying that even just holding a relic grants some of its benefits. With great difficulty, the young man tries to block the examiner's very powerful attacks. But someone like Hakagami extracts the proloma from the relic, and with that his abilities skyrocket. Being attacked relentlessly, the protagonist wonders if he can't do the same thing. The spirit then asks if he has ever done it before, and Kurogane Toma is confused by the question. With no time to think, he is hit by a strong blow and thrown back, spitting out some fluid. Then Ayan reminds him that he used this power during his fight against Dr. Gaia in the dungeon. He then remembers that in the fight against the doctor, he definitely used that strange power. Ayan praises the young man's ingenuity for defeating the white dragon without using proloma, but it warns that that alone won't be enough to defeat the man with the colorful glasses. The spirit agrees with the examiner and turns to give Tuma an important piece of advice. Meanwhile, Hakagami continues to attack relentlessly with his very powerful electric spear. Then Ayan asks him to imagine that he is fighting with his beloved sister right behind him. With that, the image of Suzu praying for him appears in his mind, filling him with new strength. At that moment, a huge wave of energy explodes, and the young man's power finally awakens. A dense smoke rises to the heavens as a bluish aura envelops the protagonist's body. With a new perspective, he understands that protecting his sister is what becomes his strength. The examiner is surprised by the sudden change in the aura and power of the young man before him. His sword then begins to glow with a mysterious blue flame, full of a new power. Without wasting time, the boy charges forward with all his might and attacks the examiner with his new strength. The impact of the blow is so strong that it destroys the entire ground and creates a huge crater there. The other hunters are completely shocked by the destruction, not understanding anything. Hakagami then adjusts his glasses and is impressed by the young man's absurd power. Enveloped in his bluish aura, the protagonist prepares to continue the great battle. Ayan then says that anything is possible in love, and that's why he is Kurogane Tuma. The young man feels his body is much lighter and thinks he can now land as many blows as he wants. From afar, the S-rank huntress watches everything with a crazy and very excited smile on her face. He wonders why he suddenly became so strong, not knowing the exact trigger for it. Hakagami thinks that the E-rank learned in an instant what took him 5 years to master. With a smile, he thinks he has finally found someone worthy of carrying the A-rank. The protagonist then faces the examiner with renewed determination in his eyes. Their fight kicks up a lot of dust, and the other candidates wonder what is happening. At the agency, they see nothing and comment that there are only 20 seconds left for the test to end. But the director has a hunch and thinks that perhaps the young man might pass the exam after all. Based on his intuition, he firmly believes that the young man will successfully pass the test. The other hunters then start cheering for the boy, shouting for him to keep fighting. The timer shows only 5 seconds remaining for the end of the great, intense challenge. The countdown begins as the two continue to exchange fierce blows without stopping, and in the last second, their blades clash with completely unbelievable force. At that moment, both Hakagami and the protagonist feel a strange and different threat. Without even waiting for the end of the test, they both jump out of the arena at the same instant. Time runs out, and the others are confused because the examiner and the young man vanished out of nowhere. From afar, the blonde huntress sees the examiner's clone suddenly disappear into the air. The real Hakagami appears, and she comments on how incredible the young man she recommended was. The examiner adjusts his glasses and says he has no choice but to admit his talent. Even so, he thinks what is happening right in front of all of them is crazy. A gigantic hole then opens in the sky above the exam site, frightening everyone. Ayan asks about the test, but the young man says that the most important thing now is something else. He then says he saw something very strange coming from deep within the forest a little earlier. The young man felt a sinister and evil presence coming from the bell the doctor used before. With that, upon landing in the forest, he finds a boy with glasses next to another person. The boy with glasses recognizes him from the exam and asks what he is doing there so far away. Our protagonist then recognizes the two as the candidates who were taking the test with him. But to his shock, the other man has been completely petrified and turned into a statue. The young man with glasses then warns him to be careful, as it might be the work of a monster. Kurogane Tuma says the guy just went to take a leak and this happened, making him very tense. With a serious look, the protagonist turns to the young man and asks if he is a relic. Ayan is completely confused and asks what the heck he is saying with that. But the young man affirms that he can see the presence of a relic coming from that boy. He explains that the presence doesn't come from an item, but the young man is the relic itself. The boy with glasses doesn't understand anything and asks if the protagonist is right in the head. The young man then rephrases the question and calls him by the name he was looking for, Basilisk. The boy with glasses is shocked and with an evil aura asks how he knows that name. Angrily, our protagonist shouts and orders him to restore the petrified person now. And without wasting time, he charges with all his might toward the enemy, shouting the name Basilisk. The young man with glasses is a little surprised by the sudden attack but is not shaken. The two then clash with everything, and a huge wave of energy spreads through the forest. But to everyone's surprise, the enemy manages to stop the blade with his bare hands. He then faces the protagonist with a look of superiority, holding the sword tightly. Kurogen Tuma is completely shocked as he can't believe he stopped the weapon like that. The two then move apart, and the boy with glasses says the protagonist got it all wrong. The young man then realizes he can't move his sword and is stuck in place, unable to react. The boy explains that he petrified the other man, but that he is not the basilisk they are looking for. Our protagonist is confused and asks what the heck he means by that revelation. The boy then analyzes the weapon and says he has never seen a relic like that in his life. But he remembers having felt that same disgusting presence somewhere else before. With a smile, he asks if the creature has turned into a relic and calls it Ayan. The spirit Ayan then faces the enemy with a serious and very suspicious look about the situation. Understanding what's happening, the young man with glasses jumps away, distancing himself from Tuma. He then wonders aloud what would be more beneficial for the basilisk at that moment. With this, the protagonist finally understands that he really has a connection to his target. But in a comical scene, the young man says that he actually has no idea what to do there. Suddenly, he changes his mind and, with an evil look, says it doesn't matter what happens anymore. With a cruel and sadistic smile, the boy decides he will simply finish them off there. Without wasting time, he advances with a powerful aerial attack toward the protagonist. The two then begin to exchange a sequence of fast and very intense blows in the forest. The spirit Ayan watches the battle closely and notices something strange about the enemy's blade. Ayan finally recognizes the weapon as the spider sword called Ananthem and seems very surprised. The being of light then confirms Tuma's suspicion and says that the enemy is the relic itself. The boy with glasses is amazed by the personality in the relic and wonders why it has a body. Ayan then thinks that perhaps the basic also has a physical body, but is ignored by Tuma. The protagonist then shouts furiously and asks why the heck he turns people into stone. The enemy responds mockingly, saying he only does it because the basilisk told him to. Toma then asks how many people he has petrified, and the boy calls the question cruel. He then makes a bizarre comparison to the number of nose hairs someone plucks in 5 years. Remembering his sister, the young man becomes completely furious and shouts at him not to joke about it. With a cry of rage, he charges with all his might at the enemy, who seems quite calm about the attack. The young man says relics can't be broken, and the protagonist asks Ayan if that's true. Suddenly, the enemy draws a second sword and says that now the fight will get much more serious. With a smile, he asks how the young man will deal with 2 weapons if he was already struggling. He then prepares to use a new and powerful attack with his second blade in hand. With a shout, he activates a special ability called Thorless to finish off the protagonist. He then unleashes a massive electric attack called Lapham Lightning Spirit Dance. A huge tornado of golden lightning forms around the enemy as he prepares to attack. The boy with glasses is surprised because he didn't expect the young man to know the relic's name. But suddenly, the examiner Hakogami appears and blocks the attack with his spear to protect Tuma. Without wasting time, the man launches a powerful counter-attack toward the enemy to retaliate. He then unleashes the lightning-clad wild dance, and the enemy dodges the attacks. But to the examiner's surprise, the boy with glasses manages to block everything with his swords. The man is impressed with the defense and wonders what kind of crazy trick that is. The enemy praises his speed and says the relic seems like a part of his body. With a smile, he advances and Hakogami thinks he is facing a dual-wielding relic. But the examiner soon realizes his guess was wrong and that there's something more to it. Because the enemy reveals that he is actually using a total of 4 blades for the fight. With that, the battle becomes even more intense, with the two exchanging blows at high speed. Ayan then realizes that the man with the dark glasses was not fighting seriously against Tuma. With this revelation, the protagonist runs to help the examiner without a second thought. The spirit tries to stop him from getting involved, but the young man is already determined to join the fray. He believes that while the enemy is focused on Hakogami, his attack might work. With this, he hopes to force the boy to give information about the basilisk's whereabouts. Ayan then shouts desperately for Tuma to retreat and asks him to remain calm in the fight. But the enemy sees him approaching and, with a smile, says that Ananthem is a special weapon. Suddenly, the blades break and fly through the air, controlled by mysterious chains. It is then revealed that Ananthem is actually a weapon relic with 8 blades. The protagonist is completely shocked and speechless by the power of that weapon. And before he could do anything, he is hit squarely by a surprise attack from the enemy. But Hakogami is caught by the weapon's chains while protecting the young man with his body and spear. The protagonist is in shock seeing the examiner sacrificing himself to protect him. The man then falls to the ground completely wounded, but still manages to say a few words. He explains that this happens because the young man only looks at what's right in front of him. And he continues, saying that hunters always have people to protect right behind them. With a narrow view obsessed with a single thing, he won't be able to protect anyone. The protagonist is speechless at the man's lesson, who says his clone is at its limit. He then recognizes the young man as an A-rank hunter and gives him his first mission. With his last bit of strength, he asks the young man not to let anyone pass for 5 minutes. Hakogami says it's now his turn to protect and dissolves into particles of light in the air. Kurogane Toma kneels, and the man says he is the only one he recognized as A-rank. The enemy then complains that there's no fun in fighting a clone and prepares to leave. But a drone appears, and he realizes that anyone who knows about him needs to be eliminated. With an evil smile, the boy with glasses decides he will finish off everyone there. But at the agency headquarters, everyone watches the scene, terrified and unable to do anything. The protagonist then stands up and says with determination that he will not allow any more victims. He thinks that until now, he was only focused on himself and his own selfish situation. But he finally understands that it's not just about being protected but also about protecting. The young man then promises he will save Suzu, but before that, he has another mission. With a determined look, he prepares to protect what was entrusted to him by Hakagami. Ayan then wonders why Ananthem took on a human form and decides to investigate. Ayan then calls for Tuma and says that every blade created with its ability has a characteristic. The spirit advises him to use the special characteristic of his dragon scale blade. With that, the young man fills with blue energy and prepares for battle with his partner's help. Ayan then tells him to finish the enemy, who faces him with a very confident and evil smile. The villain with glasses provokes him, saying he seems to be lost in his thoughts during the fight. Without wasting time, the enemy launches an attack with his chained blades toward the young man. With a toothy grin, he shouts, reminding him that they are still in the middle of a fight. He says he doesn't know what the young man is planning, but he won't last even 5 minutes there. But suddenly the protagonist seems to have an idea, and his eye shines with a new strategy. The villain then attacks with 2 of his blades coming directly from the front of the boy. Without difficulty, the young man manages to block the frontal attack with his scale sword. The enemy wonders if that would be a blind spot as the young man faces him up close. Suddenly, another blade appears from behind and hits the protagonist in a blind spot. With the impact of the surprise blow, the young man is thrown far away, unable to defend himself. In the air, he is hit by several other attacks and realizes he is at a great disadvantage. He then thinks that if he continues like this, he will surely be completely eliminated. The enemy then scoffs and asks if a little thought will change anything in the fight. With that, the boy with glasses launches another shower of blades to end the battle for good. The protagonist faces the massive attack coming his way with nowhere to escape. But with a determined look, he shouts for the enemy to get ready because the fight isn't over. With a focused eye, he concentrates all his energy to use the weapon's special ability. And with impressive speed, the young man manages to dodge all of the enemy's attacks. The boy with glasses is a bit surprised by the young man's sudden change in strategy. He then realizes what the protagonist was planning and seems to understand his new tactic. The villain explains that the young man concentrated all his energy in his vision and arms to fight, but he warns him that this energy also works as armor to protect the whole body. With that, if an attack hit an unreinforced part, it would be the end for our protagonist. The enemy then praises the young man's determination while preparing a new massive attack. But he scoffs, saying it's a pathetic determination and attacks with everything he has. The villain shouts that the young man is just buying time and tells him not to just stay on the defensive. Kurigane Toma faces him with a serious look, sweating coldly but not saying a single word. The enemy gets irritated and asks if the young man thinks he's foolish enough to fall for that. He says he won't continue with half-baked attacks, and one of his arms begins to transform. At that moment, Ayan notices something important and says that Ananthem hasn't used one thing yet. The spirit then concludes that the enemy hasn't used the special ability of his relic yet. The villain says it will be a problem if the spearman shows up and decides to end it all at once. With that, he transforms his weapon to a giant club and activates the Cursed Nest ability. The villain's new weapon spins at high speed, looking like a very bizarre chainsaw. With a quick blow, he hits the protagonist squarely, who is sent flying and bleeding. With a shocked face, the young man doesn't react while Ayan calls for him to look at something. The enemy advances with his spinning weapon to attack with everything he has, without mercy. Ayan warns that the attack is coming, and that this is the critical moment of the battle for them. With a shout, the villain attacks with full force, and the spinning weapon goes toward our protagonist. The young man manages to block the blow, but the force of the impact drags him back violently. With his teeth clenched, he holds back the attack with his sword, but the pressure is too great. The boy with glasses shouts furiously and promises to turn the young man into dust with his blow. Kurigane Toma feels his arms are about to give way under the enemy's overwhelming force. He then plants his feet firmly on the ground with all his strength to try to withstand the attack. But even so, he realizes he can no longer support his own body under the pressure. With the weapon getting closer and closer to his face, the young man is terrified by the situation. Suddenly, the image of the petrified hunter appears in his mind, leaving him very frightened. A voice then echoes in his head and says that this time it's his turn to protect everyone. With anger and determination, the protagonist shouts and refuses to give up that fight. He then shouts that he will never lose and uses all his strength to counter the blow. With a war cry, he manages to push the enemy's weapon away with his sword. The villain scoffs and says that if courage changed things, no one would need to fight so hard. But suddenly he notices something strange and his eye widens in complete shock. He then notices that the young man's sword is glowing an intense red and is confused. Ayan then says it will show how a dragon breathes fire, and the young man is left confused. The spirit explains that a dragon rubs its scales to create power and absorb it. With that, it reveals that the characteristic of the dragon scale blade is very special, and that its ability is the accumulation and release of all the impact it receives. The villain panics and realizes that the young man wasn't defending to buy time. Aeon then shouts with all its might and tells the protagonist to swing his sword without hesitation. But the enemy shouts furiously and tries to push the blade with more force to stop the attack. Without wasting time, the young man shouts the name of his weapon and releases all the accumulated power. With the impact, a huge explosion of fire sends the boy with glasses flying away with full force. The protagonist unleashes a massive wave of energy that advances toward the enemy. The blow is so powerful that the villain's spinning weapon begins to break into pieces. The boy with glasses is completely shocked to see his relic being destroyed there. He then screams in desperation because he can no longer push the sword back at all. With his arms trembling, he cries out in pain from the overwhelming pressure of the young man's blow. The villain is then thrown back, and his weapon shatters completely with the force. With that, the blast of fire hits him squarely and launches him into the sky with great speed. The enemy flies through the air as his body begins to fall apart and his glasses fall off. This new and powerful attack is called Imperial Wrath and shows the young man's full strength. Defeated, the villain's body falls from the sky and begins to break into several pieces in the air. Upside down, he caws and seems unable to believe he was defeated in that way. Upon hitting the ground, the enemy's body crumbles into several pieces like a statue. The protagonist then stands on the spot with a trail of fire left by his attack. Completely exhausted, the young man leans on his sword as its ability is explained. The blade stores all the impact from the blows received and then releases it all at once. He looks at his hands and thinks that if he hadn't reinforced his arms, his bones would have turned to dust. With that, the protagonist approaches the fallen enemy and calls him by the name of Ananthem. He then orders the villain to tell him everything he knows about the basilisk's whereabouts. But the enemy looks at him mockingly and refuses to tell anything to the one who defeated him. The boy says Basilisk is a comrade and that he would never betray him in any way. Angrily, the young man shouts furiously because the villain has turned many innocent people into stone. Suddenly, the enemy's face begins to crack, and he says it seems time is up. The villain's body turns to dust, but before that he says he will give a piece of information as a gift. The boy reveals that the news of Aeon becoming an artifact has already reached the basilisk. With an evil smile, he says the villain will want the spirit for his revenge. The protagonist is completely shocked and confused by that revelation. With that, the purple dust vanishes into the air, and the enemy's last words echo through the silent place. The spirit Aeon then stares into nothingness with a serious and very thoughtful look about the situation. Not understanding, the young man asks Aeon what the heck the enemy meant by revenge. The being of light then reveals that all weapon artifacts were created by itself. It explains that to make them stronger, absorb them one by one to increase its power. The spirit tells that its world was being threatened by monsters, and it had no choice. With that, they used these artifacts to protect countless innocent lives from the attacks. But the situation changed and its civilization discovered how to banish the monsters to another dimension. And with the end of the war, the artifacts were no longer useful and were thrown into the same hole. The protagonist is shocked by the story and says that was a horrible thing to do. He then asks Aeon if, because of this, it also hates the people of its world. But the spirit doesn't answer and approaches the remains of Ananthem, leaving the young man confused. Upon touching the pieces, a light appears, and Aeon recognizes it as Ananthem's love. With the light in its hands, it says the feeling is nostalgic, painful, and at the same time gentle. In a memory, we see the destroyed city, and a warrior says they can no longer fight. Another young man says he's not smart, but that there's no other way to save everyone. Aeon then faces the situation with a serious and very determined look about what it's going to do. The young man then smiles and says he entrusts his life to Aeon and asks it to use him to fight. With this, the spirit understands that Ananthem became an artifact out of pure love for its people. Kurogane Tuma watches the scene in silence and seems to understand a little more about his partner. Suddenly, Hakagami appears, and the protagonist is startled to see that he has defeated the enemy. The examiner releases a powerful aura, and the young man realizes that this is his true form. The man says it's been a while since he had expectations, but the young man managed to surpass them. With that, he turns and starts walking away from the site of the intense battle. We then see the petrified hunter being observed by the powerful and mysterious Hakagami. The man then says the young man is now an A rank and they no longer need formalities. With a smile, he congratulates him on the achievement and calls him Tuma for the first time. Kurogane Tuma is on the ground, feeling the weight of the battle as he stares ahead, completely paralyzed by shock. Then he breaks into a relieved smile and sincerely gives thanks for having overcome such a complicated challenge. With that, the other hunter offers his shoulder for the young man to lean on, while the protagonist thanks him for the help. At this, the scene shifts to an unknown dungeon where a young man carries a giant sword and calls for his master, Basilisk. At that moment, we see several colossal monsters gathered before a hooded figure who seems to lead this dark place. Then red petals begin to float through the air as the presence of that mysterious being becomes even stronger and denser. The being apologizes for the silence and says it was just preparing the new home to receive all its followers. It states that the group will grow endlessly, as the previous location was becoming too small for their plans. The man calls for Basilisk and mentions that he discovered the spirit Aeon has transformed into a powerful relic. The leader is then pleased with the news, and the subordinate asks what they should do with the traces of the old dungeon. But the master says not to worry, as he intends to use the ruins to destroy an entire nation as a test. With that, we see the enormous rift that opened in the sky over the city, revealing the reason for all that sudden despair. The white-haired young man smiles wickedly and comments that this disaster will be an incredible spectacle to watch. At that moment, the hooded figure releases a sinister, greenish energy as it prepares its next evil move. A giant, bizarre eye appears in the midst of the darkness, observing everything with a cold and extremely calculating gaze. Blue flowers begin to fall over the city, which is trapped in an energy bubble, as the villain wishes everyone enjoys it. Back in the forest, the examiner helps the protagonist and says they need to take the petrified man back soon. But suddenly, the young man notices something strange in the air and becomes on high alert as his senses sharpen. He wonders what that is as he looks up and sees a new threat coming directly from the clouds to the earth. Gigantic purple bubbles begin to appear over the entire region, indicating that a new dungeon is appearing there in the sky. It all starts with the young man looking up at the sky and realizing that this rift is 20 times larger than the previous dungeon. At this, the man with glasses explains that the size of the rift is proportional to the danger, and that thing could destroy entire countries. With this, he states that the threat level is national extermination, and that the disaster will be catastrophic if it continues. Then someone calls for calm and announces that a very powerful person is with them as a giant attack hits the ruins. In that instant, a massive explosion occurs in the sky and begins to shatter the entire mysterious structure into 1,000 pieces. But the figure responsible for it yawns and complains that he would like to have a rest amidst so much confusion and work. He laments that all the treasure has vanished into thin air and says he searched every corner of that dungeon without finding anything of value. Kurogane Tuma watches everything in shock, unable to believe that the giant dungeon was blown up with such ease. At this, the young man with glasses explains that the man doesn't appear in public because he finds everything a big bore and a total waste of time. It is then revealed that the owner of this power is Takaki Hosho, the number 1 S-rank hunter, considered the strongest in the world. The protagonist is impressed by the man's presence and admits he didn't know he was such an incredible person. At that moment, Hosho approaches with a leap and praises young Toma's performance during the battle against the enemies. He says the young man exceeded expectations by passing Koya's test and defeating such a dangerous humanoid artifact. With that, Kurogane Toma feels flustered by the legendary hunter's compliment and thanks him respectfully for the consideration. The blonde-haired man then looks at the protagonist and says that now that he has proven his worth, he has a favor to ask. With a bright smile, the world's strongest hunter asks the young man to lend him a little money at the moment. But upon seeing Koya's serious look, he says he was just kidding and quickly regains his leader-like posture. At that moment, Hosho explains that they are gathering the best elite hunters from all corners of the entire world. He extends his hand and says he senses a destiny of immense growth in young Tuma, inviting him to join his alliance. Finally, the group expresses immense gratitude to Hakagami for saving all of their lives in that moment of extreme danger. The young hunter talks with the group and thinks things would be better if they had the famous elixir on hand. At this, the man with glasses confirms that the agency managed to get some of the item, and the protagonist is greatly relieved by the news. The young man then says goodbye as Koya asks if the blonde guy has been borrowing money from the boy too. But Hosho just smiles and tells his friend not to worry, as he believes it's all part of a larger plan. At that moment, the S-rank hunter watches the young man run off and states that his destiny has already been set. With a confident look, the Alliance Master comments that the young man's entry into the team is a sure thing, just like Mitsuya's. He then leaps into the sky, leaving his colleague with glasses to wonder if the newcomer will really be like the legendary warrior. Then, a memory arises of when the blonde man invited Mitsuya to form the alliance against a beautiful sunset. But the examiner complains that this tactic of forcing people to join the group is quite dirty and dishonorable. With a hand on his head, the man wonders what crazy thing his leader plans to do next. We then see the city center where the protagonist questions whether he made the right choice in refusing that invitation. Leaping between buildings, he thinks that having powerful allies would be the best way to find what he is looking for. To be honest, the young man confesses he was very happy to be noticed and invited by such influential hunters. But he reflects that members of an alliance need to live together and travel the world without stopping for a second. In that instant, the blue spirit questions if the young man is actually just worried about his sister Ren's well-being. With that, the protagonist affirms with determination that his one and main goal in life is to cure the girl for good. He then remembers the previous fight and wonders how the enemy could turn people to stone so easily. But Ayan explains that the Baseless produces various poisons and likely supplied a petrification toxin. At this, the being of light recounts that before becoming an artifact, the monster was worshipped by many followers of a cult. The young man then runs with his sword, understanding that he needs to become even stronger to face the dangers ahead. The young man asks for help with his training, but the spirit Ayan says it's difficult because of their different senses. With that, the young man insists on the request, and the creature says it might consider it if the young man satisfies its hunger soon. At this, the being of light says it wants Suzu to prepare something tasty as they both run through the city streets. At that moment, they arrive at the building, and the protagonist shouts that he's home, waiting for his beloved sister. But upon entering the apartment, the boy notices the silence and wonders if the girl went out shopping. With that, he finds a note on the table, and the spirit observes the situation with a worried look. The paper says that the little one decided to become a hunter in Toyota Mare's clan, which sends her brother into a panic. Enraged, the young man shouts that he's going to finish the deadbeat blonde for involving his family in this mess. In that instant, he orders his partner to sniff out the girl's trail of love to find her as quickly as possible. The spirit then takes on the form of a tracker and says it will do it for the sake of the love it so enjoys. Following the scent, they arrive at a huge ruined tower, and the young man wonders if she is inside now. With that, he enters the place and is shocked to find the S-rank hunter standing right in front of him. The man praises the girl's talent and says she mastered the weapon he gave her in an impressive record time. At this, the protagonist asks where she is, and the blonde man replies that the girl is clearing a dungeon by herself. Overcome with anger, the young man questions why they involved his younger sister in something so dangerous. A dark look, the man confesses that he did it only to force the young man to join his elite alliance. The fight then begins, and the hero uses the steel, slicing blade technique to attack the opponent with full force. At that moment, he activates the Iron Cage transformation, trying to trap the enemy in a swift and precise blow. But the strongest hunter uses his flying cape to dodge with ease while enjoying the situation. The protagonist shouts that he has no time for silly games, and that he needs to find his sister immediately. With that, he runs toward the danger, calling the girl's name as an intense light appears on the path. The blonde man then uses the alchemical elixir on his giant sword to show the true power of an elite warrior. A massive explosion occurs on the site, throwing everything aside and leaving the young man completely stunned. But suddenly, the mood changes, and the blonde man starts giving some delicious, otherworldly food to the hungry young man. The boy finds the taste incredible, and the two share a calm moment amidst all the destruction. In that instant, the blonde man takes advantage of the lowered guard and kicks the young man, saying he left a very obvious opening. He then begins to say that the era of prosperity thanks to relics is just a lie told by merchants. With that, a vision of the past appears, showing monsters destroying houses and harming people without any mercy. The man looks to the horizon and says his true desire is to erase the Tenketsu from this world once and for all. Finally, with a determined look, the S-rank hunter affirms that he will do whatever it takes to save humanity from disaster. The young man wonders if the blonde man really sees the world in such a grand way as he watches him, sitting on the ground. With that, a silence falls over the place, and the young man reflects on the heavy words that were just spoken. But the S-rank hunter confesses that he doesn't consider himself so admirable, showing unexpected humility. The protagonist then thinks that even with great power, he would choose to save his sister before the world without hesitation. At this, he realizes that little Suzu's well-being will always be his absolute priority in any dangerous situation. Suddenly, the girl appears in the distance, waving, and excitedly shouts that she managed to clear a dungeon all by herself. Kurigane Tuma is in shock, not understanding anything, and wonders how she managed to do something so dangerous on her own. With joy, the girl shows her phone screen and says she debuted as a hunter in a very famous virtual game. The hero breathes a sigh of relief, understanding that the so-called clan was just a mobile game and not a real mission. At this, the girl comments that her brother will fight alongside Mr. Kaseki to get rid of the holes in the sky. With a sweet smile, she says she thinks that's wonderful and shows full support for the new path the young man has chosen. She then remembers that he defeated the dragon and reveals that everyone at her school sent their thanks for the heroic deed. The little one admits she felt very proud of her big brother for being such an incredible and brave person. At that moment, she touches her fist to the young man's chest and says that many people need him all over the world. With affection, the girl gives him a charm and asks him to come home so they can have dinner together like a normal family. The protagonist holds the object with emotion and feels the weight of the responsibility to protect the one he loves most in life. At this, a funny mood arises where she tells him to throw away the origami, and the spirit Ayan watches the scene, confused. But Master Hosho grabs the young man and asks if he thinks it's wrong to prioritize family before saving the world. With an intense gaze, the blonde man asserts that this feeling of protection is more than enough to be a hero. At this, he explains that his alliance has always been formed by people who fight tooth and nail for what they love. He continues, saying that giving one's best to protect something important is what really saves the entire planet. With conviction, the man affirms his belief that this love for someone close is what will naturally save all of humanity. He then extends his hand again and makes the final invitation for the young man to officially join his special alliance. The protagonist faces the leader with a renewed look and decides he is ready to accept this new and great challenge. With great respect, he bows and shakes the blonde man's hand, confirming they will work together from now on. The scene then shows the two siblings smiling and happy to have finally found the right path for their future. At this, the blonde man declares the case closed with a victorious smile but is soon surprised by a blow to the head. The examiner Koya hits his friend hard for acting as if everything was resolved so simply. The S-rank hero then apologizes while his colleague complains about the dirty tactics he used in the conversation. Finally, Koya announces that a clone of his will protect the girl while the young man is away on missions around the world. The protagonist smiles happily because now he can finally rest easy, knowing his sister is safe. In any case, he warns the girl not to follow any strangers, especially in dangerous places like this. The blonde huntress then announces that the young hero will now be working with the legendary Mitsuya's team. She explains that dangerous people are emerging all over the world and wants the young man to help stop these terrible villains. The boy realizes he can't continue as he is and feels he needs to evolve his skills as quickly as possible. With a cry of determination, the young man affirms that he will become much stronger and is ready for any challenge that comes his way. But before that, the woman suggests they train together for just one night to test the newcomer's true potential. At that moment, the hero is surprised by the sudden proposal as he observes the silent surroundings in the arena. With a confident smile, she guarantees she will make the boy 3 times more powerful within that mysterious dungeon. The examiner then interrupts the conversation, asking why the alliance leader bothered to come to that place. The man states that the protagonist will join his team, and that he himself will handle all the boy's heavy training. But the blonde woman denies the request, saying it will be very fun to watch the young hunter's growth up close on missions. She complains that she was the first to find the boy's talent, while her colleague with glasses tries to win the argument. Watching the two argue, little Suzu is confused about what's happening and scratches her head in confusion. With that, the girl suggests they both teach her brother together to end their silly dispute. The masters find the idea interesting and wonder if they can really carry out this dual training plan. The blonde man then questions if the hero won't end up passing out from such an absurd and intense workout load. In the end, they decide to move forward and ask if the protagonist is ready to start this journey right now. The young man asks them to take it easy on him, as he is scared to death of what these 2 elite hunters are planning. At that moment, the boy's little sister cheers with great energy and says he will surely overcome this challenge. The scene shifts to a huge luxury mansion that serves as the main base for the members of this powerful global alliance. Inside, a young man celebrates that the team will finally be an ideal squad of 4 very skilled people. Another member comments that the newcomer is at the lowest level of A rank, but passed the toughest test in the entire agency. Then we meet Angel Ryuga, an S-rank hunter who becomes furious and breaks his own phone upon hearing the news of the new member. But Anraku Mikudo, an S-rank warrior, seems very excited and thinks the new colleague must be a very nice person. The hot-headed orange-haired guy asks if they're trying to say the boy is stronger than him and becomes enraged. The girl lets out a cry of terror upon seeing her teammate's fury, who refuses to be compared to a beginner. The elite young man then drags his colleague by the hood while shouting for her to shut up and stop talking nonsense. He wonders when the so-called hero will finally arrive as he continues to act very aggressively with everyone in the place. Suddenly, the man shouts, lunging forward to intimidate the newcomer and show who's in charge in that elite place. With that, the young man appears sitting on the sofa, emanating a bizarre purple aura, as Hakagami observes his deplorable state. Then we see Kurogane with a pale face, trembling nonstop due to the potions that were injected into his veins. The veterans are shocked to realize the newcomer has already received intensive and very frightening training from his master. At that moment, the leader officially introduces Toma Kurogane as the new member of the unit and asks everyone to cooperate. But the hero can barely speak and greets his new colleagues with a very weak voice while trying to stay conscious. The man then explains that he administered several doses of recovery potion directly into the boy's veins to help him recover quickly. With this, the teammates wonder what kind of torture the newcomer endured that he can't even swallow a common pill. At that moment, the boss announces he has been summoned for another mission and orders the two to take the young man to learn the ropes. But the Hothade shouts, asking to go on the difficult and dangerous mission, but ends up receiving a firm no from his master. The man then says he has no time to babysit children and tells the young man not to get ahead of himself and to focus on teamwork. With that, the master leaves in a flash of energy, leaving the 2 warriors standing in the middle of the mansion's living room. At that moment, the orange-haired young man becomes furious with his superior's mockery and complains about the leader's behavior. The veteran then glares at the protagonist with a very sinister look and calls him a ragdoll to try to intimidate the hero. But the boy just observes with a doubtful expression, not understanding why he's being treated in that strange way. With that, the bully puts his foot on the sofa and reinforces that there is a huge power difference between an S rank and a low A rank. At that moment, the young man asks if the newcomer understood the message clearly while maintaining an arrogant and cocky posture. He then shouts that he is far above the protagonist and orders the newcomer to burn this hierarchy into his very soul so he doesn't forget. But young Mikudo appears with a huge smile, welcoming the new colleague in a very cheerful and kind way. At this, the girl starts talking nonstop about past missions, leaving our hero completely dizzy with so much information. The huntress then asks him to drop the formalities and says the young man can just call her by her first name. With that, she becomes enchanted upon seeing Toma's black relic and asks if she can be responsible for registering the rare item. At that moment, the hero realizes his new companion is a true relic nerd and feels a bit awkward about it. But the bully becomes enraged at being ignored and shouts at the newcomer, telling him to pay attention to what's happening. The veteran then grabs the hero by his clothes and angrily warns him not to get cocky just because he's in that group. With this, Toma Kurogane agrees that this is the current reality and tries not to retaliate to avoid an even bigger conflict. At that moment, the two stare each other down in absolute silence as a tense atmosphere fills the entire room. But the Hathig gives up the fight and says the newcomer is too dull and boring for him to keep picking on. The protagonist then wonders what he should do in that situation as he tries to understand his new colleague's behavior. With that, the three start running towards the mission objective, while the bully tells the newcomer to just watch the fight. At that moment, the Spirit Aeon comments that the group is very interesting and states that it can feel the love coming from each of them. With that, the Spirit Aeon notices that the veteran has a sense of affection very similar to the protagonist's own. The three then approach an abandoned dungeon, and the hero wonders if this job isn't too simple for them. But young Mikuto looks back and states that this job is actually of extreme importance for everyone's safety. At this, she explains that if a dungeon is left unattended for too long, a collapse occurs, and monsters invade the cities. Tomokuragain then discovers that the real reason these places are abandoned to the brink is much simpler. With that, the girl reveals that no one tries to clear these places because the difficulty level to win is just too high. At that moment, we see a horde of bizarre beasts attacking everything in sight with completely insane fury. A group of low-rank hunters then tries to fight the beasts using team tactics to try to survive the chaos. Celebrating their victory, the team of 6 brothers believes they managed to handle the situation with good coordination. But suddenly, a new wave of even stronger monsters appears out of nowhere, leaving the combatants in a total state of panic. At this, the warriors desperately realize that their gold weapons don't even leave a scratch on those powerful beasts. A giant monster then appears roaring, and prepares to crush the small group of humans cornered in the area. In that instant, a blast of fire hits the creature squarely and begins to clear the battlefield very quickly. With that, the rookie hunters run desperately, trying to escape the unbearable heat that has now taken over the area. Veteran Injo then appears amidst the flames and tells the useless ones to go home and find a part-time job. At this, the creatures let out angry growls and charge at the young man, who seems to not care about the danger. The Hathid then prepares to use his ultimate technique, called Purgatory Masamune, to finish them all off for good. At that moment, he executes the roaring flame slash and slices through the monsters with an ease that leaves anyone in shock. With the force of the impact, the people around are thrown far away as the fire consumes the remains of the creatures. Our hero then watches the scene dumbfounded and thinks that the power of this elite hunter is something truly out of the ordinary. At this, the girl explains that his weapon is of the natural energy type, and the newcomer tries to understand how this power works. With that, the bully continues his massacre, showing that despite being simple, his blows have devastating power. At that moment, the orange-haired young man breaks into a mocking smile as he faces the enemies with a very evil look. One of the monsters then opens its mouth and fires a massive energy beam toward the heroes standing in the arena. At this, Ryuga dodges the attack with great agility and mocks the creature's slowness, saying that was useless. But young Mikuto panics when she notices that if she dodges, the blow will hit the protagonist right behind her. She then starts frantically searching her bag for any relic that can help solve that huge problem. With that, the girl finally finds the yellow dragon's compass and prepares to activate the item's special ability. In that instant, she uses the directional shift technique, causing the monster's attack to change course midway. Finally, the energy beam returns directly to the creature, and Mikuto lets out a sigh of relief for having saved her colleague. Young Kuragain is impressed and admits that the members of the Alliance are truly incredible. But the Hathid scoffs, saying he can't keep up the pace, while the girl defends him. The protagonist grips the hilt of his sword tightly and decides he won't be left behind. With a blue aura emerging, he prepares to show the results of his intense training. He then activates his special bladeless creation ability, summoning the scale sword. And with a powerful cry, he unleashes the technique called Imperial Wrath to attack with full force. The young man remembers when 3 mysterious figures praised the versatility of his technique. We then see a flashback of his training where he fell to the ground exhausted, holding his shining weapon. His master watched him from above and said his energy manipulation was at an acceptable level. He was taught that he must absorb everything, like wood and metals, to adapt to any fight. The man with glasses explained the details about the dragon scale sword and how it works. The boy learned that to activate the reverse scale, he needs to store a massive impact beforehand. The master then attacked with merciless lightning, saying he had better block it if he wanted to live. The young man looked dumbfounded and confused in the face of that sudden deadly attack. A gigantic lightning bolt fell from the sky as he screamed that he didn't want to play tag like this. Back in the present, he uses bladeless creation and summons several bizarre weapons against the monsters. His sword takes the form of a dragon scale and glows intensely with red energy. With one move, he unleashes the reverse scale strike, creating a gigantic pillar of light in the room. The explosion devastates all surrounding enemies, and the young man exhales, tired after the great attack. Mikuto is amazed by the insane power, while the redhead looks on with a face of pure shock. The protagonist smiles awkwardly and mentions that the strike is disposable and only works once. The Hathid loses his mind and shouts furiously, saying he refuses to acknowledge that. He accuses the newcomer of copying his Rengoku Masamune technique, but the young man denies it immediately. The redhead says he bought the relic with his dad's money, but Tuma counters by talking about his effort. The white-haired girl tries to calm the two, who are fighting like 2 little children. Ryuga then decides to make a bet where whoever defeats the ruins boss first will be the winner. He says the loser will be a slave for a week, but the young man just wants an apology. They advance and find several small, already defeated monster which bores the red head. The Hothid says that this ruin is weak and that he alone is more than enough for everything. They arrive at the treasury and the protagonist jokes that the boss might already be taken care of, which irritates his rival. Suddenly, the girl feels an absurd chill run through her entire body and starts to tremble nonstop. The protagonist and the Hothid notice the sudden change in temperature and look up, startled. A colossal creature made of ice and crystals emerges from the shadows, emanating an overwhelming pressure in the area. The three hunters are momentarily paralyzed as they feel the murderous aura of that giant monster. But the redhead wastes no time and charges forward with a fierce cry, trying to hit the beast with his fire blade. However, the attack only cuts through the air, as the creature disappears at a speed the eyes can't follow. In the blink of an eye, the monster reappears right behind the girl, who turns pale with fear. The bully tries to maintain his composure, saying the creature is just a bit fast and cold, nothing he can't handle. At that moment, the young woman's communicator starts to ring, and an urgent voice calls her name on the line. She answers nervously, and the people in the command room announce they need to pass on crucial information now. The operator's voice informs them that the mission orders have been updated due to the severity of the situation, and the new directive is clear and direct, ordering all of them to retreat immediately from that dangerous place. The girl doesn't understand the reason for such a sudden order and asks what is happening. At the base, analysts look at the monitors and confirm that the monster is a known threat. They explain that the creature is identical to the boss that destroyed a ruin in Hawaii 3 years ago. At that time, the beast's speed outmatched the local hunters and froze an entire volcano in hours. The administration had classified the danger as city-level annihilation, but current data shows more. The monster is identified as Flak the Blue Flash, and its difficulty is now national annihilation. Upon hearing the level as national annihilation, the young woman is in total shock at the scale of the danger. Due to the urgency, Command informs them that they have requested backup from Hakagami to assist with the evacuation. The order is repeated with emphasis for them to get out of there before it's too late for the group. But the Hothid hears the word retreat and breaks into a challenging smile, ignoring the given command. With a maniacal look, he says that thing is his prey and he won't run away under any circumstances. The redhead arrogantly states that an S-Class classic doesn't need anyone's help to win. He then rudely shoves the protagonist aside, yelling for him to get out of his way. The ice beast notices the movement and prepares to launch a devastating attack against them. Suddenly, a beam of blue light is fired from the sky with absurd violence toward the hunters. The impact causes a tremendous explosion that throws the redhead and the newcomer far away with sheer brute force. The two warriors roll on the ground and try to recover from the heavy blow they just received. Seeing her friends get hit, the girl screams desperately, not understanding what just happened. Toma and Ryuga recover from the impact while Mikuto, on the ground, tries to figure out what to do. The ice creature stares down the hunters with an overwhelming pressure that makes the air heavy. The protagonist is shocked to realize that the monster speed matches Hakagami's. Bleeding from his head, the redhead smiles and says the air has now become pleasantly cool for him. Desperate, Mikuto screams for them to retreat immediately before they all get taken out. But the Hothid ignores the order and shouts, demanding that the girl provide him with cover right now. She empties her bag on the floor, desperately searching for any relic that might help in this crazy situation. Toma tries to argue that it's not the time to fight and suggests they work as a team to survive. The redhead refuses the help and insults the newcomer, saying he would never fight alongside an old rag. He arrogantly claims that if he doesn't win alone, he will never climb to the top of the world rankings. Steam rises from his wounded body as he ignores the pain and focuses only on winning the battle. With his sword in flames, he shouts that he will be the number 1 S-rank hunter in the entire world. Unleashing all his power, he launches the blazing eruption to try to incinerate the ice monster. But the creature moves in the blink of an eye, and the devastating attack hits nothing but empty air. Even after missing the target, the redhead smiles maniacally and says it will work anyway. His crazy plan is to set the entire room on fire so the monster's speed becomes useless. Tuma realizes the danger and thinks they'll end up getting burned before the enemy does. The heat becomes unbearable, and the bully shouts that if they don't like it, they can just handle it themselves. The protagonist dodges the flames and thinks that this suicidal plan will end up getting everyone finished. He concludes that if the enemy is too fast, they need something even faster to win. The young man then grabs a special relic and decides this is the perfect time to use it in combat. In his memory, his master comments on the difficulty of creating a blade without a definite shape. The young man agrees and admits it's very hard to control the core of such an unstable power. The man with glasses gives him a deadline of the morning and promises a reward if he manages to master it. Back in the fight, the protagonist grips the hilt tightly and focuses on everything he learned in training. Lightning starts to crackle around him as he concentrates a huge amount of energy. He visualizes the core of the energy and tries to mold the wild lightning into the form of a physical sword. With great effort, he struggles to keep the energy stable and not let the power dissipate into the air. With a shout, he unleashes bladeless creation and summons the lightning cloak with full power. The monster stares at the intense glow as the young man wields his new weapon made of pure electricity. The protagonist shines with a golden light as he holds his new sword made of pure lightning. His companions are left with their mouths wide open, not understanding where all that sudden power came from. In the blink of an eye, the young man disappears and reappears behind the redhead, leaving only a trail of light. This technique manipulates the body's bioelectricity, forcing the muscles to react instantly. By controlling the electromagnetic force, he can move at superhuman speed. The ice monster senses the threat and lets out a furious roar, ready to crush the boy. Without hesitation, the hero dashes forward like a thunderbolt and clashes head on with the colossal creature. His speed is so absurd that he becomes just a golden blur tearing through the air. The beast desperately tries to hit him, but the young man dodges everything with incredible ease. With a sharp stop, he plants his feet on the ground and prepares to deliver the final blow. The boy concentrates all the energy into the blade and unleashes the devastating thunder slash on the enemy. Like a divine thunderbolt, he passes through the monster's body, causing a blinding explosion of light. The electricity courses through every inch of the beast, destroying its ice structure from the inside. Pieces of crystal fly everywhere with the brute force of that special attack. Tuma lands with style, but his face shows that the effort was immense. He breathes heavily, feeling the weight of the technique taking a heavy toll on his body. Suddenly, the lightning sword dissipates and the golden aura vanishes, leaving him vulnerable. The young man is in shock and realizes his time with that power ran out too quickly. To his bad luck, the creature is still alive and gets up, screaming with pure murderous fury. The monster takes advantage of his lowered guard and launches a deadly attack to crush the defenseless young man. With no energy to dodge, the protagonist just widens his eyes, watching his end approach. But at the last second, a blade of fire appears and firmly blocks the fatal blow. The Hothid uses all his strength to repel the attack and save the newcomer's skin. Angrily, the redhead shouts, asking what the heck he's doing just standing there like an idiot. He warns that it's not the time for silly competitions and calls the young man an old rag again. Toma is surprised by his rival's attitude, who previously refused to fight as a team. The redhead then swallows his pride and proposes they coordinate their attacks to win together. With a challenging smile, the bully denies having helped out of kindness but focuses on the battle. The young man looks at his unknown weapon and understands he still needs to train much more. Even so, he smiles in relief and mentally thanks his masters for the lesson. Mikuto celebrates euphorically because they really defeated a national-level boss. She then calls for the redhead, who remains silent, staring into nothingness. The protagonist laughs nervously and asks about the bet on who would lose the fight. The young man proposes forgetting about the slavery if his colleague stops calling him a rag. Ryuga gets irritated but eventually accepts the deal, somewhat reluctantly. He admits the newcomer has strength but decides to call him Seaweed Head instead. Toma is indignant because this new nickname is even worse and more ridiculous. The two start arguing, and Mikuto has to separate them like children. The girl points to the gate and warns that they need to enter before the ruin disappears. With that, the doors open, revealing the entrance to the sacred treasure room. The golden glow illuminates their faces as they see the absurd amount of riches. The girl's eyes sparkle with pure excitement at seeing so many valuable relics together. But the redhead says he doesn't care about any of that as long as he has his favorite sword. Meanwhile, the girl uses a magic bag to loot everything she can carry. Meanwhile, the protagonist observes a small, shining object with attention. He reflects that until today, relics were just items to be sold quickly, and that usually hunters could only choose a single item as the final prize. Mikuto shows two rare magic orbs that seem to come in a special set. She also finds a duplicating medicine and is eager to test its effect. The young man praises her knowledge and remembers that her hobby is studying relics. He then asks about her item, which looks like a strange game board. The girl explains that her yellow dragon's compass is classified as a tool. She confesses that she even has a real weapon, but doesn't know how to use it very well. Excited, she decides to teach her friend the difference between the types of relics. Toma realizes too late that a long theoretical lecture is about to begin. It is explained that tools are made from the biological parts of taken-out monsters. She says these items have classifications ranging from low to special level. At the special level, there are infinite reactors and even relics that can turn back time. Mikuto mentions that the elixir is worth billions and is made from the tears of the white dragon. But she reveals that the weapons are mysterious and seem to have a single hidden creator. Young Kurogane finds it strange and comments that every treasure vault should have at least one weapon. The blue spirit appears behind him and agrees that the situation seems very unusual and not natural at all. But the redhead interrupts the analysis and shouts at the girl, telling her to stop dawdling and hurry up. She is undecided between two giant pieces of meat and asks which one to take while her colleague thinks they're all the same. Going down the stairs, the young woman celebrates the loot and says that with so many tools she can do anything. With a confident smile, she warns that in the next battle, she will shine since she didn't do anything before. But suddenly, the floor disappears from under their feet, and the three begin to fall into an infinite void. They panic as they realize they are floating in the air with no gravity and no ground. Frightened, the protagonist asks what happened, and Ayan replies that the worst-case scenario has occurred. The spirit explains that they have fallen into the celestial void, a dimensional junkyard full of dangers. A gigantic monster appears out of nowhere and lets out a terrifying roar that shakes the entire space. Tuma is shocked to see that it's not just one, but a whole horde of creatures coming. The The Hothid tries to attack, but the protagonist warns that without ground, he can't use the sword. And as expected, the redhead spins uncontrollably in the air and completely misses the blow, looking foolish. The newcomer also tries to move but ends up spinning around without being able to do anything useful in the fight. Desperate, the bully shouts for the girl to use her relics and sort out this mess. But the girl is paralyzed with fear and shouts back, telling them to solve the problem. Irritated by the lack of support, the redhead decides to use a very dirty tactic to get some momentum. Without mercy, he kicks his companions, using their bodies as a platform to jump. With the push, the girl flies directly toward the monsters, screaming for them not to come closer. Crying with fear, she complains that it's unfair that only the warriors can move in this situation. Thinking she's going to be left alone in this horrible place, the young woman begins to despair. She then shoves her hands into her magic bag, frantically searching for something to save her. Angrily, she pulls out a round object and shouts for the creature to swallow it now. The item is the explosive eye, a low-level bomb that promises to cause some nice damage. The object flies through space and hits a bizarre elephant monster right in the stomach. A fiery explosion occurs, illuminating the dark place with the impact of the detonation. But when the smoke clears, the creature emerges unscathed and even more furious than before. The redhead holds the girl and shouts that her attack didn't even tickle the giant enemy. However, the protagonist observes carefully and notices an important detail on the beast's body. The thrown object begins to multiply in the air, creating a network of bombs that surrounds all the flying monsters. The spheres duplicate rapidly and trap the giant elephant and the other creatures in a deadly and inescapable web. Mikuto reveals that she combined the bomb with the duplicating medicine to increase the firepower of that desperate attack. With that, a colossal explosion occurs and incinerates the enemies with a devastating force that lights up the entire place. The shockwave is so strong that it throws the protagonist and the girl far away as they try to shield themselves from the impact. The girl laughs nervously at the exaggeration while the redhead glares at the situation with a face that shows he's not happy at all. But Ayan appears and gets Tuma's attention, pointing to something gigantic that has appeared floating in the middle of nowhere. They see a huge, red cube-shaped ruin that emanates a mysterious energy in that empty space. The spirit explains that this structure is their best chance to return to the world below safely. The young man asks how to get there, and Ayan uses the recoil from the remaining bomb to propel them in the right direction. With a violent thrust, the three are launched like rockets toward the red cube, screaming along the way. They fly through outer space, dodging debris as they quickly approach the entrance of that ruin. The impact of the landing is hard, and they fall, rolling on the hard floor of the structure covered in red flowers. Ryuga complains about the fall, but the protagonist kisses the ground, relieved to finally feel gravity again. The spirit then points the way and says their goal is to find the treasure room of that place. It reveals that the vault has the function of generating a hole in the sky that will allow their descent home. However, it warns that they cannot defeat the ruin's boss, or everything will disappear, leaving them trapped there. The group advances through a corridor filled with red statues, and Ayan comments that it sees no living monsters. Toma looks around, and his eyes widen as he notices something strange about those motionless forms in their path. He notices that the statues are actually monsters that were turned to stone by something powerful. Ryuga tries to talk about the plan, but the young man ignores him and runs toward one of the petrified creatures. The young man touches the cold surface of the statue and feels the rocky texture, confirming his terrible suspicion. He faces the monster and realizes that it is not a sculpture, but a living being that was petrified. Looking down the infinite corridor, he sees thousands of creatures in the same condition and is horrified by the scene. In his mind, the image of the purple dagger appears, and he understands that the culprit for this can only be the basilisk. Suddenly, red petals fall, and a guttural roar echoes from the shadows, announcing a new threat is approaching. A colossal monster appears behind them, ready to attack, and the protagonist is paralyzed by its presence. But the redhead draws his sword with a sadistic smile and says that with solid ground, this will be no problem at all. Mikuto retreats, trembling with fear, and agrees with her colleague but refuses to participate in that dangerous fight. With a forced smile, she tells the two to take care of the monster while she tries to hide behind them. Suddenly, the stranger snaps his fingers, and a magical sound echoes throughout the place. In the blink of an eye, the girl simply vanishes, leaving only dust behind. The two young men are in shock as the girl screams not to be left behind. A mysterious force then pulls the two warriors and teleports them away instantly. They reappear instantly in a completely different location, with water. The scenery has changed to a place full of ancient Greek pillars and a blue sky. Completely lost, the warriors look around, try to understand everything. A voice comes from above, saying they can travel between the rooms of the ruin. A white-haired young man smiles and welcomes them to the sky hole. Furious, the redhead asks if this is his doing and where his friend is now. The enemy says he didn't need the useless one who had no relics. He smiles cruelly and suggests that the weak one has probably already become monster bait. Elsewhere, we see the girl running desperately from two huge dinosaurs. Losing patience, the Hothid shouts and attacks with his sword with all his might. A huge slash of fire tears through the air, trying to hit the enemy on top of the pillar. But Tuma holds his friend back and warns that the enemy is not just a common human. He recognizes the energy and says it's the same type as the relic called Ananthem. A green aura explodes, revealing that the stranger is a relic with a physical body. The protagonist breaks into a cold sweat upon realizing they are facing a living and dangerous weapon. The redhead ignores the warning and asks who cares what the enemy really is. The villain laughs and asks not to be grouped with that idiot who stopped thinking. He tells the humans to be gone, and wings of light appear from his back. It is revealed that he is the gold weapon relic known as Icarus. The Spirit Aeon appears and warns that those wings allow for high-speed flight. With a serious look, it tells its partner to be very careful in this fight. The enemy then reaches behind his back and draws a mysterious golden dagger. With a provocative smile, he holds the weapon and asks if they can begin. Tuma immediately recognizes that dagger as the powerful relic Gluttony. The villain realizes that the boy was the one who cleared the White Dragon's ruins before. He activates the dagger, saying it's faster to steal relics from humans. A gigantic explosion occurs on the site while the villain flies peacefully above the kiosk. The impact is so strong that it throws both heroes far away, leaving the protagonist on the ground. Amidst the flames, the enemy appears unscathed and mocks the young men's resistance with a smile. Young Kurogane is shocked to realize he activated 2 relics at the same time. He thinks this should be impossible, as not even Master Hakagami can perform such a feat. The young man concludes that this enemy is probably much stronger than the last one he faced. But with determination, he gets up and promises to defeat the human relic with his own strength. Toma then blocks the redhead's path and warns that common attacks won't work here. Irritated, the Hothid tells the newcomer to get out of the way if he doesn't want to be burned. Ignoring each other, the two activate their ultimate techniques and attack together with full force. The villain just smiles and watches, thinking that those opposing powers will self-destruct.